busy right now. Surviving on the ground. Welcome back, everybody. It's been a minute since we've done a keyboard review on this channel. Today we're going to be looking at the Luminkey Magger 68 HE Pro. That's a mouthful. I think Magger is a play on magnetic keyboard, maybe. Anyhow, Luminkey reached out to me a few weeks ago and they asked if I'd be interested in checking out their newest keyboard. And I said, sure, why not? As long as they're aware that if I find any issues with it, I'm not going to pull any punches and I'll just see how it is. So with that said, let's just get into a brief overview of what this keyboard is, and then we'll get into more details as we proceed in the video. So this keyboard is a 68 key keyboard. It has 8,000 hertz support. And the biggest claim to fame, I think, for this keyboard are the Gateron Jade Pro switches. These are some pretty decent switches. You know, Gateron's known in the industry to be one of the top suppliers of magnetic switches. Other vendors use them as well. This is no exception here. This keyboard also has full RGB support with dual chips. We'll talk about that later as well. Plate mounted stabilizers. We'll discuss that more as well in the video. PBT textured keycaps. You know, that's pretty much standard fare for top end keyboards these days. And CNC machined aluminum case, which is a nice touch. So with that said, let's move on to the full review. So the Magger 68 HE Pro supports plate mounted stabilizers, and as you can see, it's the left shift key, the space bar, and the enter key. I also got in touch with Luminkey about whether the PCB supports stabilizers, and it does not, according to the representative that I spoke to. So much like the Magger 68, the drunkdeer A75 also has plate mounted stabilizers. You know, this is a common occurrence in the industry. There's a few like niche keyboards out there that have PCB stabilizers, but by and large, I think most of them are plate stabilizers. I think they tend to have gotten a bad rep. You know, maybe some early keyboards had spacing issues where there's some rattling going on, but if you just grab this and you move this around like I'm doing right here, there's no movement on the stabilizer whatsoever. And that's a testament to the fact that you're not going to get any real rattle. And really, you know, that's all that really matters. You know, some people have like mods that do holy mod and whatnot to like mod these in and stabilize them. I feel like it's not necessary with this keyboard at all. And it wasn't necessary with the drunkdeer A75 either. This is also plate mounted, and I've never had any issues with this one. As you can see, look, I can move this around. There's no movement, there's no rattling. So yes, you know, PCB mounted, especially screw in, may be preferred by keyboard enthusiasts, especially ones who, you know, go in there and they mod their keyboards. You know, they add extra tape, pour on foam and whatnot. In this case, I haven't found any rattling with either of these keyboards, especially with the Magger. It's completely solid, and we'll get to that in a second here. But this is the topic of stabilizers. I just want to talk about plate stabilizers versus, you know, screw-in PCB ones. I'm not really seeing any difference here. So in my hands, I have two different space bars. One for the drunkdeer A75 that I've been using. It's an aftermarket one that I bought from Amazon. It's PBT. And the other one's from the Magger 68 HE Pro. So as you guessed, the top one, which is thicker, is the Magger one, and then the bottom one is the one that I use with my drunkdeer. And clearly, when I hold both of these, the Magger one feels heavier and it feels more sturdy than the drunkdeer one does. Now, keep in mind, I paid good money for these off of Amazon compared to just the one that ships with the Magger keyboard. So yeah, these keycaps, when they say they're quality PBT, they really are. The front side of this keyboard, it's 16.5 millimeters tall. So that comes out to about a 7-degree angle. And the reason it's created is because it makes it easier to type with. It's a more of a natural form factor, so you get less fatigue and you're at less risk for injury when you're typing. Now, if I compare it to the drunkdeer, you can see that the drunkdeer is a little bit thicker up front, probably by like a 1.5 millimeters or 2 millimeters. Not a huge difference, but when you're typing, you actually can feel the difference. I feel like my wrists are more strained when I'm using the drunkdeer compared to the Magger, and you can see this here. When I put when I get in typing position, my wrists tend to have to flex more upwards when I'm typing compared to the Magger, and I think over time there's more fatigue using a keyboard like this. The star item of this keyboard, however, are the Gateron Jade Pro switches, and I'm holding one in my hand right now, as you can see on camera. So this, you can see the magnetic casing inside, and it's a linear switch. When I press on it, can hear that. It doesn't make very much noise. It's 36 gram force, plus or minus 5 gram force. And now there's another Gateron switch that Luminkey also offers with their keyboard. That's a white pro switch, and that one is 30 gram force, plus or minus 10 gram force. The actuation distance supported by this switch is 0.1 millimeters to 3.5 millimeters. And it's also very precise. You can set it in the Luminkey software. You can set increments of 0.02 millimeters of actuation, which is fine detail. So this keyboard features a dual chip design with a dedicated chip for RGB LED. Now this is important because this dedicated chip will control the LED functions of the keyboard, while the second chip controls the actuation, the rapid trigger, and everything else to give you maximum latency. So you're not sacrificing one for the other. You can have the best of both worlds. So essentially you can have your cake and eat it too. Now if you compare it to the leading competitor, which is the Wooting 60 HE Plus, they had to build a gimmick called tachyon mode, because apparently that keyboard only has one chip, so it can only do one thing at a time. Either you get optimum performance, or you sacrifice that and you have RGB LEDs running in the background, but then your latency goes up. Now I believe Wooting claims that you can get up to, I don't know, 1 millisecond lower with tachyon mode. Well, you don't need that with the Magger 68 HE Pro. You can have full RGB LEDs running, and you'll also get maximum latency because of its dual chip design. Now the drunkdeer A75, from what I understand, also has its own version of the tachyon mode because it only has one chip, so therefore it cannot do both functions at once and maintain optimum latency. So that's another feature that you're going to get with this keyboard, and for $130, that's something that I did not expect. So this is a 68 key keyboard. It doesn't have function keys like other keyboards do. It's not like a 10 keyless keyboard. It's not like a 75% keyboard, which would also have function keys like the drunkdeer does, and a knob. So it depends on your use case. For me personally, I do like having function keys because I use those for video games quite a bit. And also not just video games, but for example, if I'm doing shadow play or even desktop functions, I feel like having function keys for me is an important aspect of a keyboard. However, if you're not bothered by that and you're okay with using, for example, function and then 0, 1, 2, 3 to substitute for function keys like this keyboard does, then that works perfectly well. So Luminkey advertises north-facing LEDs, and as you can see here in the exposed switch, you can see the LED at the top side. And the benefit of this is that the majority of keycaps on the market tend to support north-facing LEDs. So if you want to change these out, for example, and you want to get shine-throughs or whatever for all these, then you'll probably have an easier time finding PBT keycaps that are north-facing versus south-facing. That's really the biggest advantage. So as promised, I'm going to do a typing test for this keyboard, and I'll also compare it to the drunkdeer A75, which was my daily driver up to this point, and then you guys can decide what you feel is a better keyboard. So clearly the Magger 68 sounds much better than the drunkdeer. It feels better to type with, and it also sounds much better. And I think that's attributable to a few factors here. Number one, this is a CNC machined aluminum casing. And it's also got something called dual sandwich PCB layers. So what that means is, and if you look up on your screen, this keyboard has 2 silicon layers that are sandwiching the PCB. And there's obviously the plate with the plate mounted stabilizers and the keycaps. So when you sandwich them together, it's not like a tray mounted keyboard where there's only one bottom layer. This has 2 layers, and with the PCB sandwiched in between them, when you type, you get precision and you also get thock. And also these, I feel the switches are probably better lubed than the drunkdeer were also out of the box. You can see aesthetics wise, there's a nice metal bar here that accentuates the top. The bottom is also machined for the USB cable. So there's like a little notch there as well. They claim there's like 200 mesh, I believe, aluminum. And then there's also their logos on the back, which is kind of nice. And this is all aluminum. You can see Torx screws. There's 8 of them in the back. So you just basically unfasten these and you should be able to open up the keyboard. I'm not going to do it for this review. I did say in some of my comments that if time permitted, I would do it, but unfortunately I have other obligations, so I won't be opening it for this video. Maybe at a later time in the future, I'll do a disassembly video of this and maybe even a modification. We'll see if time permits. But for the purpose of this video, I will not be doing that. The build quality is immaculate. I don't have any issues with it whatsoever. I didn't have any scuff marks on the top bar over here like some users did. There's no dents. There's no flexing of the keyboard, and you don't want any flexing of the keyboard because this is a magnetic keyboard. So I know there's some thock enthusiasts out there that they load up their keyboards with foam and tape mods and gaskets and whatnot. And so their test for a keyboard's thock test anyway is if they push down on it and you get a little flex there, to them that's a good thing. Because it's going to feel good. You're going to get that bounce when you type, and it's going to feel good to your fingers. But you don't want that in a Hall Effect gaming keyboard. You want a keyboard that's firm, that's not going to move, because these switches have a magnetic field, and they depend on that magnetic field to deliver results to you, especially within 0.02 millimeters. So you don't want that moving around and disrupting that magnetic field. So this keyboard, it does not flex when you push down on it. It stays firm, but it also feels great because of the silicon sandwich pads. Now, SOCD is one of those features, or snappy tappy, or whatever you want to call it. It's one of those features that it's finding itself getting banned now by certain developers like Valve, for example. Counter-Strike 2, if you look at your screen, it pops up a message, warning you not to use SOCD. Other games that I've used, such as Overwatch and the Finals, I did notice an improvement with SOCD active. Now, if you ask me, did it make a huge difference? Did it change my KD? No, it did not. But was the difference felt in game? Yes, it was. Was I able to play a little bit better? Yes, I certainly was. Is it going to make me a pro player? Certainly not. It's not going to make that big of a difference, but it is a noticeable difference, and it's just another feature that you can check off, right, when you're advertising these kind of keyboards. Just like this keyboard features 8,000 hertz polling. Does the 8,000 hertz polling make a difference in gaming? No, really, it does not. It's not just like a mouse. 8,000 hertz polling on a mouse is basically gimmicks. It's gimmicky. I've always said that. You really don't notice much even going from 1,000 to 4,000, let alone 8,000 hertz. And even if you have, let's say, a 500 hertz or higher monitor, your chain of latency is going to be somewhere else besides your keyboard and mouse along the way. So you're not going to notice that a small 0.125 millisecond latency. You really are not going to notice that at all. And the same applies for mice. So yes, it's nice to have. It's a good feature to have. Is it going to make any real difference in gaming? No, it's not. And anybody that tells you otherwise is lying to you. So rapid trigger, it works as advertised. And these Gateron Jade Pro switches are super reactive. I have mine set up at 1.2 millimeters of actuation distance with 0.2 millimeters of sensitivity for rapid trigger. And yeah, as soon as I push my key down, and if I want to reactuate it over and over, I can with a 0.2 millimeter rapid trigger. And just, movement feels super reactive compared to a normal keyboard. Feels just as good as my Razer Viper V3 Pro and my drunkdeer. I did not really notice any performance difference between the 3 keyboards. So I use a program called Keyboard Inspector, and while not designed specifically for this function, it does help you determine if the keyboard is delivering the polling rate as advertised. I tested this against a drunkdeer, and drunkdeer was averaging about 500 to 1,000 hertz, so it was delivering on what is advertised as a 1,000 hertz keyboard. Now let's see if the Magger 68 HE Pro also delivers that as advertised 8,000 hertz polling rate. So as you can see in the testing results, this peaked at 7646 hertz, so that is really close to the 8,000 hertz advertised. So yes, this is a true 8,000 hertz keyboard. I know there's others on the market that claim 8,000, but they don't reach it. This one does. So Luminkey software is typical of, I would say, of Chinese manufacturers. In that I mean that it's got the features that you expect, you know, your lights, it's got your macros, you know, then you can also set up function layers because this is a 68 key keyboard performance area where you could set up, you know, your rapid trigger. And it has some additional settings here too, like bottom out optimization, dead zones you can set, like for example, per key, let's say the space bar, I click on dead zone, and there's a top dead zone, bottom dead zone that I can set before the key triggers. Their official explanation is in Chinglish. So it says, for some types of switches, the stroke may have a tolerance of 0.02 millimeters when enabled. Triggering is determined as soon as the bottoming is reached to avoid accidental resetting. Now you can see here, you can switch between the different kinds of switches. Now, I've talked to Luminkey about this, and if some of you are wondering, you know, because it's hot swappable, if you can put in non-Gateron magnetic switches, I'm sorry, but you cannot, as of this time anyway. It'll only accept these specific Gateron switches. So there's a Jade Pro, White Pro, and that's pretty much it, you know. So it'll only take these specified Gateron switches, nothing else. Now for advanced, you have two function layers that you can toggle between. So for function layer 1, for example, you can set up, you know, your DKS, MT, TGL, SOCD, and RS. So if you don't know what this is, let me go back to the main layer and explain that to you. So SOCD, that's snappy tappy. If you're familiar with, you know, Wooting or Razor, that's what that is. So essentially it gives priority to the last key you pressed. Therefore, like if you want to do counter strafing, now I know that's banned in Counter-Strike 2, but you can still pull it off in games like Overwatch where it's important. Essentially, you can strafe and then you can immediately strafe back to the other side. And if you're looking at the key here, you see how the inputs are going in, and one overrides the other one. So essentially, you're not pressing one and then pressing the other one at the same time and getting a cancellation and nothing happens. So with this, you can easily counter strafe back and forth. And that's important because you can control your crosshair. You'll get fluid movement back and forth that you can control much better than you could without SOCD. And yeah, that's why there's some games out there like, you know, Counter-Strike 2 that consider it cheating. Anyway, DKS, 4 functions with a single key. You can bind 1 to 4 functions depending on 4 different press levels. So drag and drop the key into desired to bind the DKS. I don't use that. MT, double click. A single key to achieve 2 functions. Hold the key for one and click the button for another. Again, I don't really find that useful. TG, but they give it to you, so if you do, you can use a TGL toggle switch. So click the button to switch on or off, contiguous trigger. Pressing the button is a normal triggering behavior. Drag and drop the key under the desired depth. So again, not something I use. Rappy, snappy. Select 2 keys and press the button. I think this is supposed to be a variation of SOCD. So yeah, select the 2 keys and press the button farther away in the process of triggering. When both keys are pressed completely, both keys will be triggered. So a little bit different, I guess. They both triggered instead of canceling each other out. So if that's, I don't know what kind of game that'd be using for. I play mainly shooters. I don't really see any benefit of having this feature for a shooter. And then obviously there's SOCD that I have set up for A and D. You click on A, click on D, you hit continue, and then you also enable rapid trigger, and you can set your actuation distance. So mine would be 1.2. Now keep in mind, I have the same thing set in performance, but for whatever reason, it wants you to set it here too. And I think it overrides it. But anyway, last priority, this is still in Chinese, but anyway, here's instructions. Can I click on this? No, I cannot. Okay, so you hit save, and now it's set. Last input priority, that speaks for itself. And here's, you can test the binding here as I'm pressing the keys. Yeah, so then you have function layers, 2 different function layers you can assign different keys to. So there's also macros. You know, you can set a different record list. You can set up delays, input intervals, and then you set up the record here, and it'll go through it. There's also lighting. So there's different lighting modes here. Now there's a whole bunch of them included. You can see here, you know, it goes from musical rhythm, custom lights, all the way down to wave band. So they've got a bunch of them here that you can select through, which is nice. You can also custom select your palette. You can select your brightness, the speed, the direction you want it to go to. So they've got a myriad of selections you can go to customize it however you like. Now, one thing I do like about this keyboard is it has dual processors. Now, some keyboards, drunkdeer, only have the one processor, so they have to, you know, set a special mode to basically freeze the lighting just so they can keep rapid trigger and the latency down. Now this keyboard, because it has a separate processor for lighting, it's not affected at all. So, you know, you can have fancy lighting going and you can have rapid trigger and maintain your low latency or optimal low latency of 0.125 milliseconds at 8,000 hertz polling. So with everything said and done, what do I think of this keyboard? You know, how does it stack up compared to the drunkdeer, the Razer, and the SteelSeries keyboards that I've used in the past? Well, I think it's a really good keyboard for what it offers. For $130, you get a CNC machined aluminum case, you get 8,000 hertz support. Again, gimmicky. You know, it's not a really big deal for keyboards. Hell, it's not even a big deal for mice, like I said. But it does check off that box. It supports 8,000 hertz, 0.125 milliseconds latency, and the 8,000 hertz is genuine, as I showed in the video earlier. It actually does reach 8,000 hertz polling, so it's a real deal. One nice thing about it, it does have those dual chips there, so one's for LEDs and then one's for everything else, you know, rapid trigger and SOCD. So you're not sacrificing one for the other, like Wooting 60 HE Plus or even the drunkdeer A75. So that's a nice touch. I don't like the fact that it doesn't have function keys. That's just a personal preference of mine. And I've said it before, 75% TKL. Those are just my personal preferences. I like those form factors. I feel like, you know, these 60 form factor keys or 68, they give up keys unnecessarily. You don't need to give up function keys. What's the point of that? Just to have a smaller form factor, but why? I could never figure out the logic behind it. This is a Chinese keyboard, right? So when you buy a Chinese keyboard, you can expect Chinese warranty support. So if you run into issues with this, well, you're gonna have to send your keyboard back to China, and that's not exactly an easy task to do, and it's probably not cheap either. And who knows if they offer, you know, shipping labels or cross shipping. I don't know. I haven't gone through that with Luminkey, and I haven't even asked them about it. But I would imagine that you'd probably end up paying shipping, or if you don't, they cover it, but it's going to take a while for you to get the keyboard repaired and sent back to you. But with that said, this keyboard itself, the package that it presents, it's a really good one. And I give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. You know, it has a good presentation. I don't like the fact that it doesn't have the F keys, but it delivers on it what it promises. Rapid trigger, SOCD, you know, RGB LEDs, dual chips, extremely good gaming performance. Build quality, the build quality is immaculate. It's 8,000 hertz. What else can I say? It's a damn good keyboard. And if you're in the market for one and the form factor doesn't bother you, I highly recommend it. Go out there and grab yourself one. Go to luminkey.com and pick one up. In a few days, I should be receiving the Wooting 80 HE, and I'm looking forward to putting that thing through the paces as well, especially Wootility, because it's such a renowned piece of web software, and I want to see if it lives up to the hype or not. And the keyboard itself, you know, people have a lot to say about Wooting, and I want to feel, you know, I want to check it out for myself. I never owned the 60 HE personally, but I know quite a bit about it and have a couple of friends that own one. In addition, I'm set to receive the Lamzu Maya X. That's still on order, the Fanatic version. They're taking their sweet time to send it to me, but once I get it, you can be assured you're going to see a review here as well. So until then, take care and stay safe, and we'll see you next time.